5 minutes later, I get an email from the Provincial saying, "Congratulations, you have my full support."
This is an interview with Father Christian Fini at the Mazenod Centre, 649 Burke Road, Camberwell, 2 p.m, Thursday, November the 2nd, 2023. Father, thanks very much for your time.
Not an absolute pleasure.
Father, can you perhaps set the scene and talk a little bit about your early life, where you were born, your memories of growing up, and ultimately what led you to join the Oblate Order?
Thank you. Well, I had a interesting upbringing and providential, I guess, I'd like to say. God works in mysterious ways, because for me, life could have gone very differently when it comes to religious life, if that makes sense. So I was born here in Australia of migrant parents, so I'm first generation Italian, and I went to school at Holy Redeemer in East Oakley, and so I was enrolled and destined to go to Salesian College. And so then when I was in about grade 3, Mum and Dad bought a new house out in the sticks, which in those days was Mulgrave, not Cranbourne or Berwick, and fortunately it was 500 metres away from Mazenod College, so I went to Good Shepherd Primary School, where we went regularly to Mass and part of the parish there, and then I joined Mazenod College. And you know, maybe jumping a little bit ahead to go backwards in one sense, you know, I joined the Oblates, and because they were the guys that I knew, apart from the diocesan way of life, and it was appealing to me, and I wanted to be part of a community. And yet, once I joined the Oblates, I went to a study at Catholic Theological College, where a number of religious orders gathered together to study. And, you know, there's only one other order I would join, and that would be the Salesians, because we got a great relationship with them. We got similar charism, a similar vision, you know, in modern terms, a similar vibe. And I reckon if I had stayed at, if God continued to call me and I had stayed at Holy Redeemer and gone to Salesian College, maybe I would have been a Salesian, and that wouldn't have been a bad thing. But I certainly have no regrets in being an Oblate. I love the charism and being an Oblate.
I'm fascinated to know a little bit more about your family story. Your parents came to Australia after the Second World War?
Yeah, in the 1950s, that wave of migration. So my mother comes from Rome and my dad comes from Tuscany. And so they met here as young adults. And it's you know, I come from two very different family migrant stories. So my dad's side of the family was a classic chain migration. So his two older brothers came to Australia first, and then the rest of the family followed. They were subsistent farmers on their own property and land. And then Mum came from the city, so they were, they came from the city for different reasons. I often think, I suspect my grandfather did 2 years of military service, and then the war broke out, and he was very much a pacifist and not a fascist, maybe more of a socialist, which was the different tension in that time. And I think in some ways he turned his back on Italy and didn't want to be there anymore, wanted to get out of there, even though they were probably more comfortable in some ways. So it was an interesting migration. And then the classic, you know, Mum's side of the family came out during the Depression and during financial difficulties the country was going through. And my grandmother didn't feel settled. They got up, returned to Italy. 2 years later, they got back in the boat and came back to Australia because then they didn't feel settled in Italy anymore, and lived very happily here for the rest of their lives. Yeah.
I was curious to know whether growing up you experienced any issues with racism?
Yeah, in that I had a great childhood and a charmed childhood, and my family my dad's side of the family is a large family, so there's 8 families, 7 brothers and 1 sister. 2 returned to Italy, and then 6 were here, so a rather large family, and they lived on the other side of the city. They were all, a lot of them were Epping and Reservoir, and where did you go to school? Bandura, and so they went to Parade College, a lot of my cousins, and we were out this side of town and probably had mixed less with Italians apart from our families. So I don't know whether I experienced racism overtly, apart from the childish stuff that, we pick on, the human nature of picking on what's different. But I was very fortunate not to be experienced that greatly. Although I remember one of my experiences of being a migrant, first generation, which I really related to when I was principal to the boys and the young men that I served as principal. But I remember I moved from Mulgrave, or Willis Hill now, where Mum and Dad live, 500 metres from the school, to the seminary, St Mary's Seminary in Mulgrave, which is now relocated to Camberwell. And that's probably 3.5-4 kilometres from my home. And it's interesting how I moved from an Italian home, Australian Italian home, to a very Anglo-Irish seminary. And there I was like a fish out of water. I really felt, the diet, no decent coffee, diet, alcohol was an issue. We were treated like children, and that wasn't what the environment I was brought up in. And I was the wog boy there, and I mean that in the most affectionate way, not I was the Italian. Then when I was in my formation, I was sent to Italy for a year, and I lived in the Italian seminary for 12 months, for 6 months of my 12 months. And it's funny how there were parts of me that felt more at home in the seminary, yet for the Italians, I was the l'americano, the foreigner. So, and I remember reflecting with Mum and Dad one day on that, and I said, in Australia, I'm not Australian. In Italy, I'm not Italian. What the hell am I? And they looked at me almost with a tear in their eye and said, you know what, we tried to protect you from the feeling of what it is to be a migrant. And that sometimes we just don't fit in sometimes. And I guess in my time as rector and principal at Mazenod College, of a college that is so diverse and so beautiful, with a tapestry of colours when you sit there in front of them, I could relate to the young men that we were serving and the challenges and the tensions that they were facing in their own homes sometimes, and the cultural and the sometimes generational issues that they were facing. So it was some insight, personal insight, that I brought to the job as a first generation Australian. Yeah.
And just leaving with your parents. The one question I'd like to ask before we move on is the influence you believe they both had on you. When you look back at their lives and how it shaped yours.
Yeah.
To what extent do you cite the influences of your family in terms of how you are? Yeah.
Oh, I think without a shadow of doubt, we're for the most part, I don't know what percentage, but we're the product of our families, both genetic and environmental. And I was fortunate to have 2 amazing parents who are still alive. They were here for lunch yesterday, and gave me every opportunity, maybe forced me to do sport, which I disliked, even as an opportunity. And certainly, I think out of all that they gave me, it's my faith and and education were the two things that they really made sure that they were the priorities in my life. And I think that shaped me in a massive way. And I think that ethic and that striving to do better than the last generation as really honouring what sacrifices they had made. I'm very cognizant of the sacrifices Mum and Dad made to ensure that we had an amazing upbringing and education, private education, in line with our faith and our practices. And I'm sure, like everyone, the older we get, the more we appreciate it. That's part of trying to help young men appreciate that in their own lives as young men as well.
And you mentioned young men, and it struck me just reading a little bit about your journey, Father, that there's been this magnificent, commitment to youth. Why is that, or why has that been? What was the attraction with youth that you saw? I can really impact here.
Yeah, that's a really good question, which I've probably never been asked before. I think that's providence, and that's where God's called me to, and that links back to my Italian experience. So going to the Italian province, I experienced an incredible youth movement that they established over a number of years, and I think I wanted to replicate that. I think it's been also it's part of our charism. It links the founder made a choice in his when he started the province, when he started his ministry, he made the choice to work with the most we use poor and abandoned badly, but it's those that were on the fringes of the community. And at that time, it was prisoners in a military prison camp, and it was the young people. And the young people were being controlled by Napoleon at the time, and they weren't allowed to gather in groups, they weren't allowed to be educated in the faith. So he had a real passion for young people and for education of young people. And I guess in some ways for me that's living out the charism which we as Oblates in the Australian province have done faithfully for 128 years. We were called here for education, so we were originally asked to come here to start a reformatory school which didn't last long, and then moved into education, and it's been a significant thing in our ministry here in Australia for the time that we've been here. And I guess I was the recipient of good youth ministry in my home parish of Good Shepherd Parish that was run by the Oblates. So it was the young Oblate priests at Mazenod College that were the chaplains to Antioch. I experienced Rosie's. I experienced the Oblate passion for education. I guess that's shaped who I am. I often describe my working with young people as a gift from God because I don't get it. There's a lot of stuff that young people do, and the older I get, the less I understand and am interested in, and I wouldn't put myself down as one of the cool kids or someone who tries to be that. Having said that, I've always managed to connect with young people. So yeah.
I think the advantage you do have is that you are still a young person. You are of a young age, and that must surely help in terms of the cut through to younger people and people that have got their own needs and issues to deal with. It must be a great advantage.
It is to a certain degree, but I think when it's a gift and it's part of your ministry, it doesn't make a difference. Because I've seen guys that are a lot older than I'm 48, a lot older than I am, relate to young people in amazing ways in our province and overseas. So it can help, but I really do believe it's some people can do it and some can't. And yeah, I've been fortunate to have established a youth ministry in the province, and it's 23 years later, I think, 22, 23. 23 years later. It's still going, I'm still part of it. I'll be happy to hand it over a little bit, but I seem to get drawn in. I'd like to be the godfather, you know, a little bit more hands-off and a little bit more, but at the moment, that's what it is, yeah.
And I'd imagine, Father, the inspiration you draw from young people that you deal with must be incredibly rewarding personally to see younger people thriving that you do have to deal with. It must be a great thing.
It is, and it's confronting as well. It's rewarding, but it's also, I do believe they shape young people. Take no crap. They take no prisoners. Their bullshit detectors go off brilliantly. You know, we know that from education. We know that from youth ministry, and so I believe that healthy and appropriate interaction between oblates and lay people, especially young people, makes us better oblates, forms us to be more compassionate, more understanding, and it's part of our charism to be close to the people and to be with people. I think it's confronting, and it certainly, I believe, has made me the oblate I am today. Yeah.
So if I've got the numbers right, you were 40 or 41 when you became rector at Mazenod?
Your numbers are pretty correct. I celebrated my 40th birthday on the 30th of January and was taking on the college the following year. Well, that same year, sorry.
So how did that come about, Father?
Yeah, that's, some would say, is it Stephen Bradbury, the famous skater that fell, I'm not a sports fan, that everyone fell aside and I got stuck. It could be unlucky or God's providence. I'm not sure which one it is. Depends on how you critique my time as rector. So that came about quite surprisingly. In formation, I did do. So in our formation, we do quite a bit of study. So I did my undergraduate in theology, my master's in theology, and then I made a choice, not everyone did this at the time, to do a dip ed, because I had this attraction to working with young people, and that was going to be fulfilled in the Australian province more or less through education. So I made that commitment to that and be open to it, because I just wanted to be open to any ministry. As a missionary, I just want to be able to go wherever I'm needed. And so I got ordained in 2001, and I sat down with the provincial at the time, and he said, "Where would you like to go? What would you like to do in your ministry?" And I said, "Oh, well, you know, I did my dip ed, I wouldn't mind going to schools." And he said, "Oh, great, marvellous, we need to send you to a parish." I'm like, "Okay, why did you bother asking? But I'll go happily." And he said, "Listen, if you're unhappy after a year or so, you know, I just need you to fill in a gap for a year." And then after, well, 3.5 years later, I loved it. And then I moved back to here, having established the youth ministry, and World Youth Day was coming. And then I got involved in vocation and youth ministry and formation. And then after World Youth Day, I got involved in our MAMI and Missionary Association. So I'd kind of given up the thought, you know, there was this traditional thought that one should, and there's probably some wisdom in it, maybe, that one should do so many years of teaching and experience of schools before taking on the leadership of a school. And so I didn't have the privilege of doing that. So two things happened. Just before my last appointment, I did a stint as the rector of the seminary. I spoke to the provincial. I said, "Oh, listen, there's 3 schools. There's 3 guys in charge. One's going to be retiring the next 10 years. You know, I'd be open to go to a parish for a while, and then put me in a school for a while for a bit of experience, and then if you need me in leadership, then I'll be ready. Then my conversation didn't go, things started heading out of the direction, so I just let my registration lapse after, or I went into non-teaching or whatever that level is. 6 months later, Bishop Mark Edwards, who was the principal at Iona College, rector at Iona College, was made a bishop, and then we were short one guy. And so I went from giving up to, I'm never going to get to a school, to next thing being put in charge of a school, which was a pretty big shock to the system. I ate, breathed every minute on my walks at the gym. I was listening to podcasts about education. I was reading. I became obsessed to try and get up to the, people had confidence in me, and I had enough confidence in myself to say, from a managerial and a people's thing, I think I can manage it, but I had to get across the get up to speed with the education stuff. And that was challenging. That was, and people were very generous to me. I think being an Oblate helped, and having lived, I was living at the college. So there was a period from 2007 till the day I got appointed. I was living at Mazenod, so I was helping out at the school. I was sitting at the table with both Pat Moroney and Michael Twigg when they were rectors, and as Oblates we talk about things, we debrief. There were things that I was dealing with as principal that I knew the story about because I'd heard it over the dinner table. Like any family, we discuss, we support one another. We bring it to prayer, we pray together. It's part of our life. That even though I was in that period from 2007 till I took over in 2015, I think. In that period, there was a year and a half that I was rector of the seminary, but still in Mulgrave, but I was there experiencing the school. So I think that helped a little bit, but it was certainly a steep learning curve. And there were times where I felt like a 2-year-old in the sense that my biggest question was why? And I'm sure the deputies, frustrated the hell out of them, because I'd say to them, well, so we're doing this, but why? And I'm sure it would have driven them insane. And then times I would say, oh, can we change this to this? And they'd go, oh, but we've always done it that way. Oh my God. That was the phrase, if I could take a phrase out of the English language, would be, we've always done it this way, or even worse, the Mazenod way. I talk about the most debilitating, stupid phrase you could possibly have, because it limits you and the ability to grow and see the horizons and the beauty of the future. If you're always going, you take what's good, you don't throw everything out. You take the beauty of the past and you move it with you into the future. But if you've always done it this way, you're always going to do this way, and you're going to die. It's a sure sign of death. And it used to do my head in, that comment. So, but it was interesting. A lot of the times, I'd say, but why can't we move this? And then once they went through the whole process and the logic, we'd go, all right, we'll leave it there, because there was logic behind it. There was a timetabling issue. There was some other issue that didn't line up. But oh God, the number of times I got told, this is the Mazenod way, or this is how we've always done it. I may have had hair before then, I don't know.
So when you became principal, Father, did you take on the position with any preconceived notions about what you wanted to bring to the school, or did you have a vision for where you wanted the school to go? What were the preconceived notions you had?
Yeah, they're all wrong. So one of the most famous comments that I made, and I should have known that I was being set up, but I was kind of probably overwhelmed with everything. There was a term that Father Michael Twigg, who was the rector before me, and I had together, gave me that term, first term to finish off a few things in my job and for him, because it all happened very quickly. And he introduced me to the architect, and he said to me, "Oh, this is the college architect, you need to get to know him." And I'm like, "Oh, good, but I'm not interested in building anything, you know, I just want to get my head around." Well, then I took up the school and discovered that we didn't have enough classrooms and there was a few issues, and so all of a sudden I went into a building frenzy, which was on top of trying to... But after a little bit of time, and after maybe 6 months and maybe the 12 months time, I clearly, for me, it became teaching and learning was really what my passion was around, and the introduction of IT. We were still using trolleys at that stage, and we didn't have a one-to-one laptop program. I almost felt it was criminal to employ young teachers because we were setting them up in an environment that was just not standard. But you know what? That's what Mazenod did. This was the Mazenod way. You know, I had cues at my office when I said I was going to introduce the one-to-one laptop program, telling me how I was going to destroy the school and the marks were going to go down and blah, blah, blah. And to their credit, there are a number of those people that came back to me and congratulated me or thanked me, and especially once we hit a pandemic. But my passion was really around the young man that is in our seat today, and how best can we give him every opportunity to journey in faith and to be educated to the best of his ability, and that he leaves the door proud that he did the best he could possibly do. That was my hope, and I probably said that 1,000 times at Mazenod College when I was principal, that my only one dream was that every guy there left proud of his achievements. And it's not about ATAR, it's not about every achievement they did, and they did the best they possibly could. And no one could take anything away from them if that's... So I guess that became my focus, and on top of the build, but it was really to invest in the learning and teaching, and in particular the IT, which is a passion of mine.
And the example that you gave there, the pushback that you initially had, bringing, I guess, Mazenod into the 21st century.
Kicking and screaming, but yes.
It obviously reflected that you had to have conviction. You had to be firm in your stance in a lot of areas, I'm sure, in terms of how the schools managed. Did that come easy or hard for you? Are you that sort of person?
I think I might be that sort of person, but I did discover within myself a steeliness, maybe, might be a resolve, or that once I had, I think, gone through a due process, or once I go through a due process and a decision's made, we've got to go through with it. Yeah.
And being principal of a college, can it be a lonely experience? If you did, how did you overcome that?
Yeah. Well, in any leadership, in particular the church, we all suffer from the mushroom syndrome. We're kept in the dark and fed manure. And the further up you go in anything, it's going to be like that. And so, yeah, having been at the college, knowing people, there were still a high percentage of staff that taught me there. There's only 3 wonderful staff, 3 teachers who taught me that are finishing up this year. One in particular I didn't tell you that story, but it was the one that was the first person to ask me if I considered being an Oblate, was my Year 10 RE teacher, Joe Moore. And it wasn't an Oblate that asked me, but it was a lay Oblate, a person entrenched in our charism, passionate for the Oblates, passionate about his faith and education and the college, and saw something in me before anyone else did. And my response to him was, of course, no. I've got other things I want to do, and I had a vision for myself and a future for myself, and it changed. And God has a great sense of humour. And then I became his boss. which I think is very entertaining. Sorry, the question, I got sidetracked. The question
about, I guess, the fact that
it can. It can. And it particularly as a priest principal. There was only one other person in the country that was in the same position, and that was Michael Twigg, because, Michael Twigg and Peter Daly were both in that position. And I was a bit closer to Michael, and then Peter became provincial, so then it was just Michael and I. And so there's a real, I think, maybe an unhealthy tension at times between those two positions. So yeah, there were times of immense loneliness, and I spoke to the staff quite openly, maybe towards the end, that my second year, to say I was clinically depressed would be maybe a bit too overboard, but I certainly was in a depression and got some help. I went and saw a counsellor for a while and ensured that I had supervision and coaching and spiritual direction in place. But certainly that second year in particular, I was in a bad shape. You wouldn't have known, my PA didn't even know, who was amazing. She just started seeing these unusual random appointments being put in my diary, which were my appointments to go see a counsellor for a couple of months, just to sort out the massive transition that went through my life, that I had gone through, and the personal impact it was having. The other positive that I had was, and I think needs to be part of the story and the history, and it occurred in that room just next door. When we didn't know what was going to happen, so we were one principal short. The three current principals were pushing for me, saying, "Christian, you can do it. We'll support you." The provincial at the time wasn't 100% confident that we could put in such a green newbie into such a good school, and once again, not an Oblate school either. Well, it is an Oblate school, but it's not an Oblate owned and operated. So, we had to consult with the diocese, and the Arch was very much, yes, would love to have Christian there. However, going into that room, we didn't know what the council met in a crisis meeting, and we didn't know which way it was going to go or who was going. People often say, "Oh, that was obvious," our decisions, but we often go into council meetings with an idea and it changes, or things happen. And just before the meeting, John Sherman called me, and I took the call in here, and he said, "Christian," he had just moved to Queensland, where he was from, had just settled in, and he would have been in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, I can't remember exactly. And he says, "Christian, if they're worried about your age and how you're inexperienced, I'd be happy to come down and be vice rector and support you." So the meeting was going around and round in circles, and then at the right time, I dropped the Sherman bomb and said, "Oh, listen, John Sherman's would be open to coming and being," and that kind of shifted the movement of the meeting. And so I was really lucky. I had a great community. I had John Sherman, a former rector, and Kevin Devine, a former rector, was my rector in my last 4 years at Mazenod. Pat Moroney was my first rector for year 7 and 8, and then Kevin Devine. So I had two really wise heads in the house, and I could come in frustrated as all get up and express what I was feeling and bounce ideas and get an opinion, and that opinion, they didn't care what I did with it. It was almost like a mentoring or apprenticeship in a sense, learning on the job. So it was a good experience, and it helped support me through. And they knew what I was going through in my second year. They knew. I kept them in the loop, but no one else would have known.
Had they not been there, do you think you were in a situation so desperate that you would have contemplated walking away? Had it ever got that?
Oh, no. There's only one time I would have walked away, and I said that to the provincial. I said, I'll take the job on one condition, that the minute I'm not good for the school, or it's not a good experience for the school, or I'm costing the school something, its reputation, it's just not working, you just got to tap me on the shoulder and say, Christian, you gave it a shot, thanks, let's walk away. That was the only condition I took it on. I said, the minute that the school suffers because I'm there, just tap me on the shoulder. Don't have to write me a formal letter. Don't have to go for a bloody dismissal process or anything like that, or 3 warnings. Just say, Christian, it's not working. It's just too much for you. Tap me on the shoulder, and I'll walk away happily. That I gave it a shot, the best shot I could, and it's not good for the school. Our vision as Oblates and our passion is for the school and for keeping it the best possible college we can for the young men that we serve there. So I'd never have got to that point. I think that's the only condition I would have walked away.
So you probably touched on the worst of times in that second year. What were the best of times? When you reflect on your time Mazenod as principal, what were the best of times?
I think being there for the 50th anniversary, having the opportunity to give back to a college that's given me so much and made me the man and the person that I am today. I think the opportunity to say was the first old boy rector. Not happy that I'm the last, but that's a part of history and church evolution or movement that we're in. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's tough. It's those tough days, and I'll focus on the tough to focus on the good, but there are times where those two things of priesthood and an employer of 200 people in such an intense situation conflicted, I often give one example where, probably one of the toughest experiences that I had was, being in an executive meeting, hopping in my car, rushing to do a funeral of a 3-day-old baby, and there's nothing hits you harder than those little coffins and a parent taking that coffin out, and any normal human being needs time to prepare for that, do that pastoral experience and support the people, and then go home and be able to debrief that somehow. But I had to then rush home for a meeting with the union about the smallest issue. It was a non-issue that it shouldn't have been, but anyway, that it is what it is, and so. But certainly for me, it's the interaction with the young men. It's those mission immersions that we went overseas. I used to I would have my lunch at 12 o'clock, which was a lunch meeting with the youth office and Rosie's. And then at 12:30, I'd come down and do yard duty and often serve at the canteen, the year 11 and 12 queue. I just loved the interaction with the young men. That's what we're there for, and sometimes as principal, you get tied up in so many things that you don't get that opportunity to spend time with young people.
Looking at the journey, Father, the change in the college itself, what have been the most significant changes to Mazenod College along the way, from the time that you were first there to the present, I guess? What's been the greatest change to the school?
I think we are currently in the process of the greatest change of experience that Mazenod has had, and it's not an easy time, not necessarily a bad time. There's not so. So the question's around the significance of my experience of change at Mazenod. So Mazenod has been an extremely stable environment for 55 years. It's now experiencing some of the greatest changes it's ever experienced. A lot of that's for good, but sometimes change is difficult for people to manage. Not sometimes, it always is. Everyone loves change until it imposes on them and it inflicts them, and it forces them to do something. So there's almost a perfect storm of change that we're going through, and it's a challenge that the new principal, Dr. Paul Shannon, will have to navigate, and he's open to, but that perfect change is the Oblate's not in leadership there anymore. The whole Max and canonical administrator shift, that's become more centralised and less local, and we had an amazingly good relationship with the canonical administrators. And then the third one would be that there's a number of staff that have been there for a long period of time that are coming to the end of their careers or moving on. So I think those three things are probably the most significant change that Mazenod has experienced ever in its history, and it's all coming together. Like any one of those things was a significant change. All three of them together is a challenge, for the school.
You mentioned, I guess, the three fathers that you had in your time that were effectively mentors to you. Do you see a similar role, relationship with Dr. Shannon? Do you sound bored?
Yeah, definitely. And he'll often call, and for one thing, and half an hour later we'll pick, what was the history behind this? What was the decision behind this? And there's always going to be opportunities for that, and he's very open to that and very appreciative of that, I think. And I guess there was, I finished very abruptly. I came in I left as abruptly as I came. So, my departure, there's a funny story to that. Like I had a staff development day and had a lady come in, Philomena Billington, come in and do some professional development around the future and the leadership model for the future. And it was always intended over 3 years to quietly and in a nice manner, not violently as it occurred, separate the role of principal and rector. And we had that strategic meeting. I hopped on the 3:00 flight, 3:30 flight to Perth to go for my annual retreat. And while I was on that flight, my WhatsApp phone went off, and I saw it was a +3 number, which was an Italian number. And I thought, it's one of my mates from Italy calling. And I messaged back saying, listen, I'm on a flight, can't take your call. And it was the regional councillor, who at the time was an Aussie, and he wrote back saying, Christian, call me when you land. And I'm like, okay. At this stage, it wasn't expected there to be a change in provincial. Normally you do 2 terms, and so I wasn't really expecting it. I was really looking forward to finishing my term as principal. And then about 5 minutes later, I get an email from the provincial saying, congratulations, you have my full support. And I'm like, oh my God, my life has ended. I'll never forget the sinking feeling in that seat. I don't fit in economy class seats very well, but I just flopped in that seat. And I'll never forget, there was some crazy, we'd landed and there was some stupid game of football. I hate football. There was some stupid game of AFL going on with Collingwood involved. And there was this Muppet lady that was a Collingwood supporter, 3 seats in front, narrating to the entire plane as if we cared the results of this game, and I'm sitting there going, my life is disintegrating before me. I have spent 4 years of my life getting ready for trying to get used to this job, and by the fourth I'd felt confident. I could walk into the office in that fourth year feeling you'd never know everything in any job, but I felt confident. I didn't feel like a complete idiot. I wasn't faking it till I made. That was my general thing. Fake it till you make it. You know, I did my best to rely on good people in that school to keep the place going until I kind of understood what was going on. Finally got to that point, and my life's falling apart. And she's telling me how many goals Collingwood kicked. Like, I give up rat's ass about that. You know, oh my God. And so I landed on the other side of the country, and I was no longer principal of the school. I was the provincial of the Oblates and Mary Immaculate here in the Australian province. So it was tough. It was not easy. It had a physical reaction, like I was throwing up when I got to my accommodation. I felt as if I was letting the school down in a crucial period. There was all that type of stuff, but it is what it is, you know, in this job.
How long did it take you to get through that?
I get over things pretty quickly and get into, well, what needs to be done mode pretty quickly. There's only so much you can whinge and moan about things for only a certain amount of time. It's not going to change the reality that I was flying back to Melbourne in a week's time after my retreat, and I was no longer the principal. Oh, well, I was until the end of the year, but I had to put things in place to change fairly quickly. And that's why we went into that period of which the canonical administrators backed me. CEO at the time, it wasn't Max, wasn't that keen. They wanted 1 year of a interim principal, then appoint, and I just argued there was too much to be done and there needed to be an interim, and that's where Tony took the courage of stepping up to that role, stepping away from his deputy role, Tony Coughlin, and really a great man of service and loves the college and the community there, and was a good interim to allow for that transition. Because it took me 3 years to establish and get the MOU between the diocese, Max, and the Oblates in place. So he's a great man and a great supporter of the Oblates and the college, and you'll probably find that every rector that had this privilege of working with him will say the same. He now looks after our education across the province and works with me here. But yeah.
So I'm sure at this stage in your life, Father, there is still a lot of work to be done and still much to be pursued with your life. But when you reflect back on your time at Mazenod, do you look back with a genuine sense of achievement that you put things in place for the benefit of the school going forward?
Yeah.
And ultimately, what do you think that Mazenod actually means to you?
Oh, I'm hoping that my relationship with Mazenod doesn't end. That there will be a time where, you know, I get reappointed there as chaplain or as rector. But I certainly look back on it as a great time of learning. I certainly have skills now for the job that I'm in now and other works that I do in the congregation, thanks to that experience, while it was a tough experience. And I hope that I left the place a better place than I received it and contributed to it. Not that it was a bad place at all, but we all want to contribute to make the next step forward and to make it a little bit a better place. And I hope, you know, when I go walk around and see the library and the learning centre, and then the library as a hub and a learning centre, not just a repository for dusty books, and see young men with their laptops, there is a sense of achievement and joy around there. I was maybe I don't know whether this is worth talking about, but there was a little bit of a curriculum thing that to say introduce would be very polite. I said, this is happening. So it's a program that I took from one of our other colleges, and it's called a microbit, and it's a little bit of technology that the boys get to program with and load it on straight away, and they see that effective coding happening straight away. Great opportunity for young men to learn. It continues that coding experience that they're already having in primary school that we didn't have in the curriculum. So I just forced it into the curriculum. And the other day I was at a friend's place who was a teacher at Mazenod at some stage. So he knew what I had gone through with that introduction, and his son's at the college, and he said, show Christian your microbit and your laptop. And it was just so rewarding to see this young man who had no idea the amount of effort that I went into introducing the one-to-one laptop program, and the amount of effort that I went into showing me how he could make the lights flash and the buttons work, and that just brought me great joy. You know, I want to see education for young men that is appropriate for them to help them grow to be better men in our world. Yeah, sorry, I don't know, I think I got distracted, which is part of my problem.
So, I wanted to ask you actually what Mazenod personally.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For me, it's, there's a great thankfulness and gratefulness for all my experiences at Mazenod. So my experience from 1987 to 1992, where I still have friends that I went to primary school, high school with, or just high school that I still connect with today, that shaped me into the man I am. And then also my experiences of rector, I often really feel that I got more out of it than I put in, that it helped me grow as an individual. And so Mazenod has a special part in my heart for the faith formation, for everything that it's done for me. So I've got a great love and respect, and as an old boy, I obviously have a bias with Mazenod and would do anything that I'm asked, including crazily becoming the principal rector overnight. So yeah.
I said, along with the old boys of my old school father, that the connection never ended with your last day in year 12. It's for life in a lot of ways, isn't it? Because it does cut deep.
Yeah, definitely. There's something, I think in particular with boys' school, there's something even a little bit tribal about it. There's good and positive things about that. But if we focus on the good and encourage the good, there is great opportunities to then serve the community beyond the college.
That's a pretty good note to end the interview. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been fascinating to hear your story, and all power to you for what you achieved at Mazenod, but what you are achieving from here on in. Keep up the great work, and thank you so much for the opportunity to have a chat.
Not a problem. Absolute pleasure. And I'm really excited and hope to be part of the 60 years anniversary, as I was the 50th anniversary. And my hope and prayer is for that college, that every young man that goes there just walks out of those gates proud of what they've achieved. That's so important for us.